Captain Jake Morrison was halfway through his morning coffee when the sky lit up with a fleet large enough to block out the stars. 200 alien warships, each the size of a city, had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. They came with threats, weapons, and a message: bow before your new galactic overlords. But they weren't ready for what humanity would do next. Before we dive into this epic clash between humans and an unstoppable alien empire, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the universe is full of stories where the underdog doesn't just survive. They change everything. Commander Rylan Voss was halfway through his morning brew when the entire cosmos seemed to crash into his radar. He nearly inhaled the steaming liquid as the alert panels around him erupted in crimson light. 200 colossal vessels had just emerged from slip space on the fringe of the Solari Reach, each one dwarfing anything the Terran Union had ever engineered. He lowered his cup onto the console with a soft clink, the warmth forgotten. Aboard the orbital watchtower Sentinel Arcus, Earth's outpost was modest by galactic standards, aged, underfunded, but his post nonetheless. For 3 long rotations, he had monitored cosmic debris and rogue asteroids. This was no drifting rock. "Kalen, confirm what I'm seeing," he called, voice low but urgent. Lieutenant Kalen Sarah, his signals analyst, blinked hard at her terminal. Her face had gone pale beneath the monitor's glow. "Commander, registering 200 separate entities. Each one's mass matches a continental zone. These aren't scouts. They brought their whole armory." Her voice held, but barely. Rylan could feel the tremor hiding behind her words. He pulled up the external cams, then chuckled. A dark, stunned, disbelieving laugh. The enemy fleet looked monstrous, enormous beasts of alloy bristling with cannonry like metallic thorns. It was as if an entire urban district had been welded into a weaponized monolith. Kalen swiveled toward him. "Sir, what's funny?" Rylan gestured at the display. "Those titans, they're absurd. They're massive, sure. But watch how they maneuver. Like glaciers in orbit. And the weapon mounts? They're pointing in every direction, except where it matters. It's like someone tried to build a fortress without thinking about physics." The armada crept inward, its vast shadows sliding across Jupiter's rim. The larger warships turned slowly, ungainly leviathans grinding their way past the gas giant's moons. One barely missed colliding with an ancient asteroid field, scraping past it like a drifting island. "We've got a signal," Kalen said, hands darting across the console. "Multi-band broadcast, non-standard encryption." "Patch it through," Rylan replied, lips twitching with dark amusement. The laugh was gone now. His eyes stayed on the screen, on the juggernauts drifting ever closer. The display surged with light, and then a figure emerged. It looked like a sculpture come to life, a towering shard of refracting crystal, with limbs that shimmered like frozen lightning. There was no visible face, but something about its bearing conveyed power and menace. When it spoke, the voice echoed like thunder bouncing through a hollow canyon, deep, resonant, and layered with distortion. "Primal life forms of the third sphere," the being announced, its tone dripping with regal disdain. "I am Grand Marshal Saurix Vicor, first spear of the Celestial Dominion. You stand at the threshold of ascension. The might of 1,000 empires bears down upon your world. Kneel before the Dominion, and your species may yet earn the privilege of servitude." Commander Rylan Voss glanced at Kalen, who was biting her lip to keep from laughing. He reached for his comm switch, trying to suppress a grin. "Well, greetings, Grand Marshal," he said, his voice smooth casual. "This is Commander Voss, outpost lead here on Sentinel Arcus. Welcome to our quiet little stretch of the void. Gotta say, your ships are something else. Big, spiky, very dramatic." He leaned back in his chair, watching the alien commander's image remain motionless. "Quick question, though. Do those things steer? Or do you just kind of point them and pray?" The channel went silent. Reelan imagined the alien trying to process what had just happened. This probably wasn't how their glorious conquests usually began. Kaylin turned away from her screen, her shoulders shaking. Reelan gave her a wink and tapped the mic again. "No disrespect intended, Marshal. I've just spent the last hour watching your fleet try to drift around Jupiter. Fascinating stuff. That lead cruiser of yours, the one covered in extra artillery, nearly clipped one of the moons. Just saying, might want to check the maneuvering thrusters." The crystal figure flickered back onto the screen, and Reelan swore it now radiated something between confusion and fury. "You insolent creature," it snarled. "That vessel could shatter your planet with a single volley. It holds the power of 100 armadas. You speak to an apex predator of the stars." Reelan tilted his head, nodding. "Yeah, I bet it could do some serious damage. Assuming it ever faces the right direction. Be honest with me, Marshal. How long does it take that thing to make a U-turn? 3 hours? 4? The Marshal let out a grinding noise like collapsing glass. "Your simplistic intellect cannot grasp the intricacies of Dominion design. These ships are paragons of innovation, perfected over eons." "Oh, I believe that," Reelan said, his tone still light. "Must have taken some brilliant minds ages to build them. Really impressive. But, just out of curiosity, did anyone stop to ask whether making them that massive was actually a good idea?" Reelan stepped away from his console, approaching the screen, as the crystalline specter flickered in place. "See, Marshal," he said slowly, "we Terrans have this old saying, keep it simple, genius. The smartest answers aren't always the fanciest, they're the ones that work." Behind him, Kaylin's fingers flew across her interface. "Commander, I'm detecting activity in their weapon lattice. Some kind of energy cannon is powering up." Reelan turned to the tactical overlay. She was right. The Dominion's lead vessel, the Crucible Ascendant, was building a staggering energy signature. The readings surged in a steady climb, and it looked like it would take several minutes to reach full charge. "They've locked onto the Ceres drift," Kaylin said, eyes narrowing. "The asteroid belt. Looks like they're setting up a show of force." Reelan eased back into his chair and calmly raised his mug. "All right then, let's see what all that fancy engineering actually does." The screen pulsed again as Grand Marshal Sorix returned. "Bear witness, lowborn species," he thundered. "The celestial dominion demonstrates its wrath. Resistance is a dream. Submission is your only future." Reelan watched silently as the charge readings ticked upward. The weapon would be devastating, no doubt. But there was something else. The Dominion vessel had gone completely inert. To fire, it had stopped maneuvering entirely, like a siege tower locked into place. Reelan leaned toward the mic. "Tell you what, Marshal, I've got a feeling this is the start of a very enlightening conversation." Meanwhile, aboard the Aegis Bastion, Earth's most advanced orbital fortress stationed between Mars and Jupiter, Colonel Idrin Solari was halfway through his midday rations when the door to the mess hall burst open. "Tactical priority, sir." Lieutenant Corin Vale's face was pale with urgency. "You need to see this now." Idrin wiped his hands and followed him at a brisk pace to the command bridge. Though dwarfed by the alien dreadnoughts, the Bastion was a different breed, agile armored, and bristling with cutting-edge Terran firepower. "Report," Idrin ordered, settling into the command chair. Corin expanded the tactical feed. "Target is their command ship, designation unknown. It's generating extreme energy levels, off the charts. They've been charging a primary weapon system for over 8 minutes." He pointed toward the readout. "It's called the Crucible Ascendant. That thing's glowing like a dying star. Whatever they're aiming at, they want it to be loud." Idrin studied the data. The readings were immense, but sluggish. All that power, and it still hadn't fired. "Open a channel," Idrin said. "Patch me through to Sentinel Arcus. I want Commander Voss brought up to speed." Reelan's face appeared once more on the comm feed, a crooked grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Idrin," he said, voice calm but amused. "You catching this fireworks rehearsal?" "Hard to miss," Colonel Solari replied, eyes fixed on the display. "What's your read?" "My guess." Rillan shrugged. "They're trying to spook us with theatrics. Scare us straight with a big boom." Idrin nodded. It tracked. The Dominion had barked their warnings, but the humans hadn't flinched. Now they were backing words with spectacle. Then, without warning, the Marshal's voice flooded every open frequency. "Observe, inferior species," he roared. "Gaze upon the fury of the celestial dominion. We shall obliterate the celestial body designated Sector Stone 77A. Witness and despair." Idrin checked his tactical overlay. Stone 77A was a large asteroid just over 3 kilometers across, floating harmlessly in the drift. An impressive target visually, if they could even land a hit. 10 minutes and counting, Corrin called out. Still building energy. The readings continued to surge. No question, the weapon was monstrous. But the time it was taking to charge made it almost comical. The Crucible Ascendant had ceased all motion and was rotating slowly to line up its shot. 15 minutes, Corrin said. Almost there. At last, the Dominion fired. A lance of searing white light erupted from the dreadnought, burning so bright it caused the filtered monitors to stutter and dim. It took nearly half a minute for the blast to travel the void. Then, with a thunderous bloom of color, the asteroid shattered into a cloud of molten debris and fractured stone. The Marshal's voice echoed again, proud and thunderous. "Behold, the destiny of all who defy the Dominion. Submit or share the fate of your drifting rock." Idrin glanced around the command deck. His crew was trying, badly, not to laugh. Even Corrin raised his hand, as if asking permission in a classroom. "Sir, may I speak freely?" "Granted, Lieutenant." That was dramatic. But 15 minutes just to charge? And another 30 seconds for the beam to reach the target? One of our rail systems could have taken that thing out in 2 seconds flat. Idrin chuckled. Corrin wasn't wrong. The Dominion weapon had power, yes, but it was clumsy and sluggish. "You know what, Lieutenant?" Idrin said, standing up slowly. "I think it's time we return the favor. Show them what we call precision." Corrin lit up like a child unwrapping a birthday gift. "Really, sir? You want to show them the new rig?" "Light it up." He spun toward the weapons array with unrestrained glee. The Bastion's kinetic lance array was the cutting edge of Terran armament. No exotic beams. No glowing effects. Just raw, solid metal flung at impossible speed. "Targets locked," Corrin reported, eyes locked on the firing array. 3 asteroid bodies, similar mass to their demo target. Distance, 4,000 kilometers. "Authorize engagement," Solari said. "Fire at will." The first launch was nearly silent. A tungsten slug no larger than a clenched fist screamed out of the rail emitter, hurled at a fractional velocity just below light speed. It struck its target in 1.2 seconds. The asteroid didn't break. It disintegrated into powder and vapor. Impact confirmed. Target 1 neutralized, Corrin said, already dialing in the second. The second asteroid vanished before the first's dust settled. The third was gone before anyone could blink. 3 slugs. 3 targets. 6 seconds. Nothing left but drifting clouds of grit. Solari leaned forward and opened a line to the alien flagship. "Grand Marshal, this is Colonel Idrin Solari, commanding officer of the Aegis Bastion. Appreciate the fireworks. Very artistic. Now allow us to share our approach to asteroid mitigation." The comms fell dead silent. Idrin could practically hear them scrambling for context. The Dominion's mighty cannon had taken 15 full minutes to charge and had destroyed 1 rock. Earth's response had cleared 3 in 6 seconds. Rillan's voice crackled onto the shared frequency. "Sharp work, Idrin. Efficient. Clean." Solari smiled. "We do what we can." The Dominion's Marshal reappeared on the primary screen. The crystalline warlord didn't look triumphant now. He looked rattled. How did you inflict such rapid devastation using rudimentary kinetics? Our scanners registered no energy buildup, no charging protocols. Solari leaned back and folded his arms. Well, Marshal, we keep it old school. No glowing beams, no dramatic countdowns. We just take something small and launch it really, really fast. He paused, then added, turns out a dense object traveling at 1/10 the speed of light doesn't need a fancy payload. But the power requirements, the Marshal sputtered. Surely that level of acceleration demands astronomical energy. Where are your reactors? Your charge banks? Idrin glanced at Corin, who offered a half shrug. Capacitors and magnetic rails, Idrin said simply. Preload the energy. Hold it in place. Let physics do the rest. No warm-up. No delay. Just fire and forget. The Marshal said nothing. Just stared. Efficient little things, aren't they? Solari added. Elegant in their own way. No need for overkill when speed and timing win the fight. Corin's eyes narrowed. Sir, the Dominion fleet is shifting. They're adjusting formation. On screen, the alien ships began slowly realigning. The effort was awkward. They drifted with sluggish hesitance, and one of the larger cruisers nearly clipped its neighbor while trying to turn. Idrin raised a brow and toggled the mic. Marshal, he said calmly. No offense, but do your people train for coordinated maneuvers? Because what I just saw looked a bit unrehearsed. Another pause. Another heavy silence. The stars, once again, waited for a response. At last, the alien fleet responded. Grand Marshal Sorix's voice returned to the channel, quieter now, and lacking the steel it once held. The Dominion Armada adheres to strategic doctrines refined over millennia. Our methods are precise. I'm sure they are, Solari replied, his tone easy. Though, maybe it's time those doctrines got a firmware update. Just a suggestion. A burst of laughter crackled through the line. Rieland's voice unmistakable. Looks like we've got their full attention now, Idrin. Solari grinned. Yeah, Rieland, I think we do. Meanwhile, Sorix's VA Corps was not having a stellar cycle. Twice now, his invincible armada had been publicly humbled by Earth's so-called primitive defenses. The Dominion Council was growing impatient. They wanted results, dominance, proof that civilization still sat firmly in the stars, not on some backwater dirt sphere. Sorix devised a solution, a cultural reckoning. If firepower didn't win their respect, then surely knowledge would. Surely, when confronted with the galaxy's finest thinkers, the humans would understand their place in the cosmic order. 3 days later, the Crucible Ascendant hosted what was arguably the most distinguished assembly in recorded galactic history. Hovering serenely in his translucent sphere was Arch-Seer Ventrellos of a luminous accord, his mind encoded with 10,000 years of collective meditation. Grinding forward on reinforced treads was Mech Architect Clarn X-12, whose databanks contained the schematics of over 1 million stellar civilizations. And towering in ceremonial armor, General Brask Th. Moore of the Wargoth Coalition stood with folded arms, eyes skimming the blood-etched cannons of conflict, their 17 laws etched into living steel. These were the paragons of galactic thought. Surely, Earth would be overwhelmed. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Benjamin Muir was stuck on the side of a highway. His truck had sputtered to a halt outside the launch facility, and he'd had to catch a ride with a passing vegetable farmer to reach the spaceport. Ben wasn't a scientist or diplomat. He was a veterinarian from rural Montana who'd signed up out of simple curiosity. After all, alien biology sounded interesting, and no one else had stepped forward. Maria Gonzalez was already aboard the orbital shuttle, flipping through her briefing materials. A middle school science teacher from Lincoln, Nebraska, she'd been selected because she had a gift for breaking down complex ideas to children. She figured aliens couldn't be that different from 13-year-olds. And in the rear compartment, Pete Iron Hands Johansson was elbow deep in a control panel, cursing quietly. At 73, he was a retired mechanic with half a century of experience and zero patience for nonsense. "They're bringing ships," he'd said. "Someone's got to check their engines." The shuttle docked with the Dominion dreadnought. The trio was led into a towering chamber, the ceiling lost in shadow. Strange runes pulsed along the walls, symbols likely full of meaning. Arch-Seer Ventrellos drifted forward, eyes glowing like distant suns. The Arch-Seer descended gracefully from his levitating sphere, his robes fluttering as though moved by unseen cosmic winds. His voice, layered and melodic, resonated like 100 voices singing in perfect harmony. "Welcome, developing intellects, to the sanctum of enlightenment. For 10 millennia, the accord of the luminous has meditated upon the riddles of existence. Through that sacred reflection, we have uncovered the 17 pillars, laws that guide all who aspire to true civilization." He began to recite them, his words echoing through the vast chamber, amplified by unseen acoustics. The first pillar defines the noble hierarchy among species. The second details the posture and tone appropriate when addressing a superior intellect. The third explains the sanctity of adhering to legacy structures and protocol. Dr. Ben Muir nodded respectfully, his hands in his lap. After 20 minutes, he raised one hand like a student unsure of the rules. "Pardon me, Seer, but what if someone just doesn't follow them?" The Arch-Seer froze mid-chant. His form dimmed slightly, as though the question had knocked something loose in the energy matrix that sustained him. I beg your inquiry." Ben tilted his head. "The rules. What if a species decides to ignore them? Who exactly enforces these pillars?" Silence fell. In 10,000 years, no one had dared to ask such a thing. "But they are the foundation," the Arch-Seer said, uncertain now. "All evolved life must comply." "Says who?" Ben shrugged. "We've got laws back home, too. Some are common sense, like don't steal someone's livestock. But others are just weird, like the one where you're not allowed to whistle on Sundays in certain towns. People ignore the silly ones all the time." The Arch-Seer made a sound like glass wind chimes shattering. Without another word, he drifted backward into his sphere, pulsing softly, processing. Next came Mech Architect Clarn X-12, who rolled forward with mechanical precision. His voice crackled like static shaped into language. "Perhaps logic will resonate where mysticism failed. Behold our propulsion sanctum." He led the group into a chamber filled with towering conduits and pulsing cores. Giant cooling towers hissed as containment fields flickered and buzzed. These fusion matrices sustain our armada's power. They are perfection, engineered over epochs. Pete Johansson wandered the chamber, tapping on metal casings, tilting his head to listen. After a while, he chuckled and pulled a faded notebook from his back pocket. "Y'all really took the long way around," he muttered, flipping through grease-stained pages filled with hand-sketched diagrams and pencil scrawls. "Been messing with fusion in my garage for years now. Just for fun." He pointed to one cooling tower. "This right here, way over-engineered. You don't need half of this if you're just a bit clever with heat dispersion and chamber geometry." Clarn X-12 froze mid-gesture. A whirring click echoed from inside his chassis. Confusion. Pete patted one of the pipes and smiled. Nothing wrong with making it big, but sometimes smaller and smarter wins. "If you shape the reaction chamber like this instead of a standard toroid," Pete explained, sketching quickly, "and feed the fuel from 3 convergence points rather than 1, you'll get triple the output with half the infrastructure." He handed the dog-eared notebook to Clarn X-12. The construct's optic lenses zoomed in, analyzing the crude hand-drawn equations. His processing core spun 1 billion computations in under a second. Primitive as the diagrams were, the math held. The configuration would work better than anything he'd personally engineered. This configuration, it defies protocol, Clarence said slowly. And yet it is correct. How did you derive it? Mostly trial and error, Pete said, scratching his beard. Blew my garage sky high. Twice. But third time stuck. Before the silence could deepen, General Brask Th. Moore stepped forward. His war plate clanked as his forearms unfolded the sacred war scrolls, ancient tomes etched with carbon steel and battlefield ash. Perhaps these earthlings will grasp the nobility of structured conflict, he declared, his voice like two boulders grinding. For 5 millennia, the Wargoth coalition has mastered the sacred art of conquest. He unfurled scroll after scroll, each brimming with complex fleet patterns, swarm formations, and multi-vector engagements honed over centuries. Dozens of diagrams filled the table, blitz columns, siege spirals, blockade crescents. These are the formations that break civilizations. Here, for instance, Crimson Eclipse. It saturates a sector and overwhelms resistance through pure positioning. Maria studied the scrolls thoughtfully. Why not just go around them? The general blinked. Go around. Yeah, you know. Flank. It's basic. When my 8th graders play capture the flag, they always try to slip around the sides. Charging straight, it never works. The chamber went still. In 5,000 years of ritualized combat, the Wargoth had never even considered bypassing a frontal approach. Their entire doctrine was based on overwhelming, head-on pressure. Brask turned back to the scrolls, scanning them as though searching for some lost detail. But the scrolls make no mention of this flank maneuver. Maybe that's the issue, Maria said gently. The best tactics don't always get written down. Sometimes they're just obvious. In the upper control spire of the Crucible Ascendant, Grand Marshal Sorix watched in disbelief. His elite delegation, the finest minds across known space, were being intellectually outmaneuvered by a vet, a schoolteacher, and a retired mechanic. The humans weren't boasting. They weren't trying to prove superiority. They were simply offering practical fixes to problems that had gone unquestioned for eons. It wasn't just humiliating. It was destabilizing. Sorix paced. His council was watching, demanding results. His reputation, his legacy, was slipping through his claws like lunar dust. He had one card left, a formal contest, 3 challenges, chosen by the Dominion, to settle the question of supremacy once and for all. He would force these earth-born anomalies to face the greatest disciplines of the stars. And this time there would be no casual improvisation. The Confederation would set the stage. Their rules, their tools, their best. There would be no excuses. The challenge was unveiled with cosmic grandeur. In the grand atrium of the Crucible Ascendant, beneath vaulted ceilings carved from star-forged alloy, Marshal Sorix stood before an assembly of alien dignitaries, 12 species in ceremonial regalia, their eyes fixed on him. People of Earth, Sorix declared, his voice amplified across the galactic relay. The Dominion presents this trifold challenge of ascendance. 3 trials shall determine your worth among the stars. He raised 3 crystal orbs, each glowing with a different hue. First, strategic conflict, simulated warfare using our most advanced neural tacticians. Second, innovation, demonstrate your highest technological achievement. Third, diplomacy, resolve a complex interstellar crisis without force. He paused, expecting silence, reverence. Back on Liberty Station, Captain Reelan raised an eyebrow and turned to Amy. Well, that sounds dramatic. Want to tell them we're in? She nodded. With pleasure. Cool. Let's play. 3 days later, the first contest began aboard the Dominion flagship. The Confederation unveiled their pride, the Ethermind, a war sim computer the size of a building. Its processors could model battles across entire star systems, accounting for orbital physics, radiation belts, even gravitational anomalies. Their champion, General Brask Th. Moore, master of the scrolls, born in battle. The humans? They sent Ryan Torres. He strolled into the chamber wearing faded jeans, a t-shirt with a spaceship on it, and a look of casual interest. By day, he worked weekend shifts for the National Guard. By night, he was a strategy gamer with a 98% PvP win rate. The aliens unveiled the sim, a fully immersive holographic arena showing stars, planets, asteroid fields. Brask announced the scenario. You command 50 obsolete ships. I will command 500 of our most advanced warcraft. Your task: survive. Ryan cracked his knuckles. Oh, so you're giving me a final boss fight right away. Nice. The simulation began. The Dominion fleet advanced in immaculate formation, just as their ancient scrolls prescribed. Waves of ships in synchronized alignment, weapons locked forward, shields pulsing in rhythm. Ryan blinked at the holograms and chuckled. They're all clumped together. This is going to be a joke. Instead of charging, he split his tiny fleet. Each vessel broke off, flying erratically, darting between moons and debris fields like gnats through a hurricane. He used asteroids for ambushes, gravity wells for cover, radiation clouds for misdirection. The Dominion fleet tried to maintain cohesion, but every time they pivoted to engage, Ryan's ship struck from somewhere else. From above, from below, from the shadows behind them. Their perfect lines collapsed into chaos. The AI tried to adjust, but their doctrine had no response for unpredictability. They were brilliant at fighting themselves. And Ryan? He played like a kid with nothing to lose. 2 hours later, it was over. Not a single one of Ryan's ships had fallen. The Dominion fleet had been picked apart, vessel by vessel, until nothing remained but simulated debris and broken formation markers. General T.H. Moore stood frozen before the battle display, his war-bred mind unable to process the outcome. How did you achieve such a result?" he asked, stunned. Ryan leaned back, stretched his arms, and grinned. "Honestly, just played it like StarCraft. Hit-and-run tactics. Use the terrain. Stay unpredictable. Real basic stuff." He paused. "You guys ever play StarCraft?" The silence was answer enough. The second challenge, technological innovation, took place the next day. The problem: develop a galaxy-wide, faster-than-light communication network. The Dominion assembled a think tank of epic proportions. 17 species contributed. Equations unfolded across multidimensional light panels. Their solution involved quantum entanglement stretched across interdimensional harmonics. 4 hours of dazzling math and technical jargon that required 3 holoscreens just to summarize. Representing Earth, Dr. Nancy White. She was 26, a PhD candidate in theoretical physics at MIT. When not running lab simulations, she taught entry-level courses to help cover tuition. Nancy sat quietly during the presentation, jotting notes in a battered spiral notebook. When they finished, she raised a hand. "That's wow. Really impressive work. But can I ask something?" The lead physicist, Dr. Vexer of the Crystalline Collective, inclined his crystalline head. "Of course. Have you tried making the quantum particles bigger?" Confused murmurs rippled across the alien delegation. "Larger particles?" Vexer asked. "Quantum effects only operate at subatomic scales. Expansion would negate entanglement." Nancy pulled out a napkin from her lunch tray and started sketching. "Right, that's what I thought too. But I started wondering, why? What if you adjusted the harmonic resonance field to allow quantum coherence at a macro scale? The math checks out. Here, look." Her drawing was crude. A few symbols, a rough harmonic diagram. But the idea behind it was radical. Instead of controlling fragile, unstable microparticles, she proposed engineering larger, entangled states that were easier to handle and far more stable over galactic distances. Vexer processed the concept. His crystalline mind ran simulations in milliseconds. It would work. And not only that, it was better, more stable, more scalable, more elegant. "This would transform interstellar communication," he said, awed. "Where did this idea come from?" Nancy shrugged, embarrassed. Honestly, one of my students asked why particles had to be so small. I didn't have a good answer, so I started thinking. Challenge 2, complete. The third and final contest was diplomacy. The scenario, a tangled web of claims over mining rights in a disputed star system. 17 species, all with conflicting interests. Cultural traditions, environmental laws, labor codes. The Confederation solution? A 400-page treaty that accounted for every contingency. It had taken 6 months to draft. Earth's representative? Mayor Tom Fairbanks, retired mayor of a small Midwest town and former car salesman. He wore a BOLO tie and carried a smile like he already knew how it was going to end. Tom Fairbanks, known back home as Mayor Bradley, wasn't a scholar or a high-ranking diplomat. He ran a town in rural Kansas with fewer than 3,000 residents. For over a decade, he'd solved disputes over parking lots, water bills, and stray cattle with calm conversation and pie charts. Common sense was his only credential. He sat at a polished obsidian table aboard the Crucible Ascendant, flipping through the first page of the Confederation's proposed resolution, a 400-page interstellar treaty, so dense it made his eyes ache. Thorough, Tom said, closing the document with a smile. But mind if I ask something simple? The alien dignitaries exchanged puzzled glances. What does everyone actually want? Ambassador Silk of the Aquatic Federation swirled in her containment sphere. Equitable access to the mineral fields, with safeguards for the native biosphere. Representative Corvin from the Mining Guild tapped his claws together. We seek employment opportunities and reparations for prior environmental damage. Elder Wispwin of the nomadic clans floated forward. Our ancestral lands must remain untouched. They are sacred. Tom nodded. All right, so you want steady jobs, fair pay, and protection for the important places. Doesn't sound impossible. He leaned back in his chair. Tell you what, let's fire up a grill, throw some ribs on, and talk like neighbors. You'd be amazed what folks can figure out over good food. Stunned silence. A grill. Wispwin echoed. A barbecue, Tom clarified. You know, outdoor fire, shared dishes, no pressure. People get to know each other. Empathy tends to do the negotiating for you. And with that, Tom pulled out his phone and started organizing. Within 3 hours, he'd arranged the impossible. Earth's finest pitmasters were beamed aboard the Dominion's flagship. Each alien group was invited to bring their own cuisine, from vapor-fried plankton to glowing root fungi. What followed wasn't a negotiation. It was a 6-hour feast. Laughter echoed across translation arrays. Old grievances softened under spice rub and slow-roasted brisket. Traditions were exchanged. Dishes were shared. Songs were hummed. And when the final plate was cleared, the agreement was sealed. No treaty. No clauses. Just a firm handshake. Mining would proceed in designated zones. Profits would be shared. The sacred lands would be honored. The 400-page document, forgotten. From his command bridge, Grand Marshal Sorix watched in disbelief. His elite tacticians, best scientists, and legendary diplomats, undone by an old man with a phone and a smoker. And the humans? They hadn't cheated. They didn't bring advanced tech or ancient algorithms. They just saw things differently. Where the Dominion sought complexity, humans found simplicity. Where others layered logic, they used empathy. It was humbling. A soft ping cut through the silence. Captain Rylan Morrison's voice came over the interstellar comms. So, Admiral, what's the verdict? Marshal Sorix exhaled slowly, his voice almost reverent. You won. All three. There was a pause. Rylan chuckled. Neat. So now what? And after a long silence, the question came, quiet, but world-changing. Would you be willing to teach us? Commander Julia Parker had one of the most unusual jobs on Earth, translating military objectives into something ordinary people could actually understand. She was chosen for this meeting not for rank, but for clarity, and because she never backed down, even when standing toe-to-toe with alien brass. The meeting didn't take place in a grand chamber this time. Marshal Sorix had learned his lesson. The towering halls and echoing ceilings unnerved humans. So now they sat in a modest conference room with soft lighting and walls that didn't hum like a cathedral. More human. The Dominion commander entered slowly. His crystalline body, once radiant and sharp-edged, now shimmered faintly, dull, almost tired. Sorix sank into the sea across from her. "Commander Parker," he began, his voice dimmer than before, "on behalf of the Galactic Confederation, we concede. Your kind has bested us in every challenge." He paused. "But I must understand. How? How can a civilization as young as yours outperform ones refined over millennia?" Julia took a moment. She folded her hands. Let the silence stretch. Then she smiled gently. "Admiral, we're not better than you. Not smarter. Just different." A faint flicker pulsed through his crystalline limbs. "But you dismantled our strongest logic, outwitted our elite, defied our centuries of strategy." "We did," she said, "but not by being stronger, just by thinking sideways." She leaned in, eyes locked on his. "You want to know our secret? We don't overcomplicate things. We don't believe complexity equals intelligence. We look for what works. Simple, clean, effective." The Admiral processed this slowly. "Clarify." Julia gestured to the metallic walls surrounding them. "Your ships," she said, "gargantuan, bristling with weapons. But you can't turn them without risking a collision. They look terrifying, but they handle like bricks." She tapped her tablet. A sleek human vessel appeared, darting across the screen like a hawk. "Ours? Smaller, faster, built to maneuver, not intimidate. You focused on scale. We focused on mobility. Yours impressed the eye. Ours win the fight." "But surely firepower, size, is strength in warfare," he insisted. "Only if it hits something," Julia replied. "A massive cannon that never lands a shot is dead weight. A small one that strikes with precision, that ends battles." Sorix was still. No rebuttal came. "And it's not just your ships," she continued. "Your tactics are ancient dogma. Your tech is tangled in layers no one questions. Your diplomacy is a labyrinth no one understands." She rose and stepped to the viewport. Beyond the glass, Earth's ships drifted in calm formation, dwarfed by Dominion vessels, yet fluid and alert, like wolves among elephants. "You want to know your real problem?" she asked quietly. The Admiral turned toward her, expectant. "You're so busy proving how advanced you are, you forgot to ask if it actually works." And in the silence that followed, the Dominion's greatest warrior realized he hadn't lost to superior weapons or ancient wisdom. He'd lost to honesty. "That's the real issue, Admiral," Julia said softly, not unkindly. "You forgot how to learn." Marshal Sorix tilted his faceted head, his crystalline features dimmed by the weight of her words. "We are a highly advanced civilization," he said, almost defensively. "We have academies on 1,000 moons, universities on gas giants, libraries encoded in starfields." Julia nodded. "Impressive. But tell me, when was the last time someone in your hierarchy stood up and asked, 'Does this still make sense?'" The Admiral stared into the table's holographic grain. Time passed in silence. When he finally answered, his voice was nearly a whisper. "Many centuries ago. Perhaps longer." "There it is," Julia said. "That's the problem. You perfected the form of knowledge and forgot its purpose. You've preserved traditions so tightly. You've choked the oxygen out of curiosity." Just then, the door hissed open. A blur of movement skittered inside. Zip, youngest member of the Dominion envoy, entered the room in a flurry of chittering limbs and iridescent wings. The insectoid youth from the hive clusters had been eavesdropping. His antennae quivered with eagerness. "Commander Parker," he burst out, "is it true that human offspring are taught to challenge authority?" Julia laughed. Oh, absolutely. Sometimes they challenge everything, even the rules we just made up. And you allow this? Zip asked, astonished. We encourage it, she said, smiling. It's how we grow. We want each generation to ask hard questions. That's how we get better. Zip's compound eyes shimmered. Could you teach us this questioning? This resistance? Marshal Sorix's crystalline body tensed, ready to object. But Julia raised a hand gently. Admiral, she said, maybe that's exactly what your people need. A generation raised to explore outside the box, not to destroy your traditions, but to test them. The Admiral's glow flickered, uncertain. But we have maintained order for millennia by adhering to protocol. And look where it brought you, she said gently. Ships that can't pivot. Weapons that charge like old engines. Strategy scrolls that collapse the second someone improvises. She sat back down, eyes steady. We're not saying throw out everything. Just open a few windows. Let some new air in. Silence fell again, deeper this time. Finally, Marshal Sorix spoke. What would you need to begin teaching us? 3 months later, on the fusion decks of the Dominion's capital cruiser, Pete Johnson was flat on his back beneath a humming reactor core. Alien engineers surrounded him, their metallic limbs twitching with anticipation. Pete, smudged with grease and whistling a country tune, adjusted a plasma regulator with a wrench older than most starships. See, the trouble with you folks, he said, tightening the bolt, is you think more pipes means more power. He tapped the containment coil. Nope. Just route the juice straight through here. Skip all the extra junk. Engineer Clank 7's optics flashed. Primitive, but brilliant. Clank 7 rumbled across the engineering bay, gears humming softly beneath his alloy plating. But Master Pete, he said, confused. Our safety regulations mandate 17 independent failsafes per reactor chamber. Pete didn't even glance up from where he was elbow deep in circuitry. Exactly. That's why your power cores are the size of shopping malls. He chuckled, wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better decades, and flicked a switch with a satisfying click. Trust me, I've spent half a century blowing things up in my garage. Eventually, you learn what actually matters. On Deck 6, in what used to be the Dominion's Sterile Medical Research Lab, Dr. Ben Murphy was giving a crash course in alien anatomy by teaching basic veterinary medicine. He stood in front of a collection of curious healers, beings made of gas, crystal, or translucent jelly, all observing his demonstration with wonder. The trick is, Ben said, drawing a crude sketch on a hollow board. Anatomy is just variations on a theme. Whether you've got 3 hearts or 1, 10 lungs or none, the fundamentals stay the same. Dr. Harmonic Pulse, a healer from the Crystalline Collective, flickered in pastel light. But each species requires unique care protocols. Ben nodded. Sure, but the logic's identical. Keep the vital parts working, fix what's broken, and don't poke things unless you know what they do. I've treated everything from pythons to ponies. This isn't all that different. Meanwhile, what was once a formal war planning chamber had been transformed into something else entirely, a classroom. Maria Gonzalez stood at the center, referee of a heated capture-the-flag match involving war generals, tacticians, and at least one philosopher. Flags were flying. Dignity was not. The trick, she said, watching a Gorthani commander attempt to sneak behind a translucent tactician, is to imagine what your enemy sees. But remember, they don't think like you. General T.H. Moore raised 2 of his 4 hands. But the sacred scrolls contain protocols for every encounter. They're a good place to start, Maria agreed. But what if the enemy never read your scrolls or doesn't care? Strategy needs flexibility. Across the ship, Admiral Sorix sat in his command center, dictating into his personal log. His crystalline body pulsed brightly, warmer, steadier, hopeful. Day 97 of cultural integration with Earth, he began. Human efficiency modifications have increased fleet performance by 412%. Engineering breakthroughs resolved three long-standing power bottlenecks. Culinary units now utilize seasoning. He paused, watching his fleet perform formation drills, human style. Loose, unpredictable, effective. Recommendation: formalize full alliance with Earth. Also deploy additional personnel to study what humans call common sense. Despite its name, it appears to be exceedingly rare. He closed the log and opened a channel. "Captain Morrison," he said, smiling. Jake's face appeared on screen, coffee mug in hand, grin unshaken. "I've been pondering your earlier warning," the Admiral said, "about a region called Texas. Should we be alarmed?" Jake's grin widened. "Oh, Admiral," he said, "you ain't seen nothing yet." And for the first time in 1,000 years, Sorix looked forward to whatever came next. What started as a threat ended as a lesson, one that reshaped the galaxy forever. If you enjoyed this journey through First Contact, defiance, and unexpected victory, hit that like button, share it with a fellow sci-fi fan, and subscribe for more stories where humanity doesn't just face the impossible. We outthink it.
The stars were fading, and Envoy Kale understood what that meant. He stood alone on the viewing platform of the Alliance command vessel, watching another civilization perish. The planet below had once housed 3 billion Zalari citizens. Now, just a charred husk, lifeless, cold, erased. The Skarn Devourers had swept through in less than half a day. Now, there was only silence and ruin. Kale's 4 limbs trembled as he held the communicator. The signal he was preparing to send might bring salvation, or spell final destruction. For weeks, the Interstellar Assembly had argued over this exact decision. The idea itself was so volatile that even mentioning it bordered on sedition. But they were out of time. They were going to summon the Deathborn. The humans from Terra 3 were the stuff of whispered legend. In the recesses of spaceports and war rooms, tales circulated of a race so inherently combative they had made their deadly world a crucible of survival. Us. Terra was a hellscape. Venomous beasts, carnivorous forests, and violent storms that struck without mercy. And still, these humans didn't just live there. They dominated it. Every rational species avoided death worlds like plague. The few that hailed from such places were deemed erratic, volatile, impossible to negotiate with. Galactic law had long forbidden interaction with deathborn species. Until today, those laws had felt justified. Kale pressed the send key. The transmission was blunt, raw, and filled with urgency. It held their coordinates, a basic language codec, and one desperate appeal. One hope. Exactly 72 hours later, Commander Dean Keller was sipping burnt coffee from a dented mug on the bridge of his long-haul scout cruiser. The Vigilant Spear wasn't flashy by Earth standards, but it got the job done, charting the fringe systems for the past 5 years. Keller's most thrilling encounter so far had been a drifting cargo ship near Saturn. That changed instantly when his comms technician, Ensign Riley Voss, snapped upright. "Sir, we've got incoming chatter. Frequencies unknown," Voss reported, eyes wide. "It's coming from beyond the Kuiper Belt." Keller set down his mug slowly. Until this point, all First Contact drills had lived in textbooks and wargames. Every EDF officer knew them. None had expected to need them. "Run it through the lexicon," he ordered, "and get Lieutenant Nia Zhang up here." Now, the audio that spilled from the speakers shattered everything they thought they knew. The voice wasn't human. Its cadence strange, syllables unpronounceable, but the translation AI did its job. "This is the Zalari Union, emissary of the Celestial Assembly. We are collapsing. Our skies burn. Our youth vanish into the void. We have exhausted our science, our minds, our means. We seek warriors. We plead for those who know war, not theory, but reality." We plead for the humans of Terra 3. Will you come? Keller's expression froze. His gaze remained fixed on the speakers as the data stream continued. Star charts, distress markers, and visuals that made his pulse spike. Barren planets, cities in ruins, corpses without count. Zhang arrived moments later, tugging on her duty coat. She was Earth's premier combat tactician, a veteran who dissected every conflict humanity had endured, from ancient tribal clashes to the orbital sieges of the 22nd century. "Play it again," she said, already analyzing the intel. "Again," she commanded softly after the message ended. They played it 3 more times. With each viewing, the horror became harder to stomach. Captain Nia Zhang was the first to speak. Her voice was low, but unwavering. "That thing they're up against? It doesn't parley, doesn't stop, doesn't think in terms of surrender or mercy." She pointed to the combat footage. "Look at how they fight. The Zolaris still cling to structure, formations, rules of engagement. Pause. Their enemy doesn't even understand what a rule is." Commander Dean Keller gave a grim nod. He'd fought enough battles to recognize hopeless odds. "So what do we tell them?" Zhang didn't hesitate. "We tell them the truth, that humanity fights dirty." Within a few hours, the distress call had reached Earth's top brass. Supreme Commander Naomi Grant called an urgent meeting of the Unified Security Council. Military strategists, government leaders, and scholars packed into the Situation Chamber, voices overlapping in heated debate. Some suggested humanitarian aid. Others pushed for diplomatic outreach. A few argued for complete silence, worried that exposing Earth to extraterrestrial powers could bring catastrophe. Commander Grant sat quietly through it all, and then she stood. Her voice silenced the room. "They didn't beg for rations. They didn't ask for doctors. They didn't plead for peace envoys," she said sharply. "They asked for soldiers. They asked for us." Objections came instantly. Fear gripped the room. No one knew what kind of war this truly was, or what humanity was truly walking into. Zhang rose to address them again, datapad in hand. "I've reviewed their war logs. The invaders, these things they call Vorax, have annihilated 47 planetary systems in the last solar cycle alone. They're not pausing. They're not tiring. And the coalition? They're losing ground fast." She activated a star map, displaying swarming red lines. The Vorax spread. It looked like blood creeping across the stars. "At this pace," she continued, "they'll enter Sol-controlled space in just over a year and a half. We have 2 choices: fight now with partners and on their turf, or wait and fight alone, at home." A silence fell, cold, crushing. Commander Grant made the call. "Send the reply. Mobilize the warfleets. Let's show them who we are." 2 days later, Commander Keller stood aboard the Resolute Flame, the message Earth had crafted stored in the ship's AI. With him were diplomatic delegates, elite combat units, and enough firepower to send a message. The moment was historic. The Resolute Flame would be the first Terran vessel to cross into intergalactic space under wartime orders. Keller reread the brief communiqué he was tasked with delivering. It was unambiguous, blunt, unapologetically human. "We got your distress call. We're en route. When we arrive, the war ends, one way or the other." The Resolute Flame leapt into hyperspace, dragging behind it the desperate hopes of a burning universe and the uniquely savage promise of Earth's aid. Back home, the world's largest military infrastructure ignited. Ships launched, weapons were tested, sleeper units were awakened. The universe had asked the Deathborn for assistance. Now it would see what that really meant. Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Reeve had served in conflicts before, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. He stood rigid on the command deck of the Echo of Dawn, a coalition science cruiser. Outside the panoramic viewport, an entire world gasped its final breath. The planet, once known as Seraphis Prime, had held over 8 million sentients. Now, it was being erased. Vorax bioships writhed across the surface, not flying so much as oozing over mountains and oceans. They weren't machines. They were nightmares given form, living constructs with no architecture, no cockpit, no visible limits. They poured across the planet like liquid death. "How long do they usually take?" Reeve asked, unable to look away. Commander Velian, a Zalari scientist, stood beside him. Her translator device clicked as it prepared to speak. The translator buzzed as it converted his words. His species resembled elongated humanoids with sapphire skin and an extra set of arms. For a planet of this scale, the harvesting cycle takes roughly 6 to 8 hours, explained Commander Threx. The Vorax operate with terrifying precision. Lieutenant Colonel Darian Holt watched in grim silence as an entire metropolis vanished beneath the inky flood. 8 million lives, erased in under a day. "How long have you been in conflict with them?" he asked. "Approximately a year and a half," Threx responded. "We have managed several tactical successes." Holt narrowed his eyes. "You've scored victories against Vis?" "Absolutely. Only last cycle, we orchestrated a mass evacuation from Ardos Prime before the swarm made landfall. 40% of the population was rescued, and the planetary museum's most important relics were secured." Dr. Eliza Monroe, who had been silently gathering data on her device, finally raised her head. She was Earth's foremost authority on xenobiology, brought along to analyze the threat humanity was about to confront. "Commander Threx, if I may," she said calmly, "what became of the remaining 60%? The alien's skin deepened to a navy hue, something Holt now recognized as their species' expression of shame. "They were assimilated, but we salvaged what we could. The Unity Senate commended our ethical restraint. We refused to deploy orbital weapons near non-combatant zones." Holt's stare hardened. "Restraint," he echoed. "Yes, we had heavier weapons at our disposal, but we do not endanger the innocent. The assembly strictly prohibits acts of indiscriminate destruction." Monroe and Holt exchanged a knowing glance. The truth hung between them like smoke. The Unity wasn't losing because they lacked courage. They were failing because they were playing by peacetime rules in a total war. Holt cleared his throat. "Commander, what are your actual operational objectives?" Threx stood taller, his tone formal. "To protect Unity territories while preserving civilian lives and safeguarding historic landmarks. Our mission is to reach a diplomatic resolution, one that ensures dignity for everyone involved." "Everyone," Monroe said quietly. "Including the Vorax?" "Naturally. All thinking beings are entitled to life. Even our foes deserve an opportunity to coexist peacefully." Holt turned back toward the observation pane. The planet below was now a seamless void. In just a few hours, a civilization with millennia of history had been stripped to fuel a monstrous war engine. "Have you ever tried diplomacy?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the blackened world. "With the Vorax, I mean." "On numerous occasions." Threx replied. "We've launched ambassadorial missions, offered peace tributes, even suggested they inhabit unclaimed systems rather than strike our colonies." "What was their response?" "None," Threx said bitterly. "They devoured our envoys." Monroe's scanner began to beep softly, her brow furrowed. "Commander," she said, adjusting her device, "I'm reading surging biological activity on the surface. What's happening down there?" "They're converting," he explained grimly. "The biomass is absorbed, repurposed into vessels and used to generate more Vorax. Metals and elements are integrated into their growing fleets. In 2 days," he added, they'll have doubled their current force. A cold fury twisted in Holt's chest. So every world they take makes them exponentially stronger. Exactly. That's the core challenge we face. Each loss isn't just a setback, it's a gift to them. They become more powerful with every victory. And you've been dealing with this, Holt said slow, for a year and a half, without changing your approach? The Alliance believes in patience during warfare, Commander Nereth said with pride. We avoid rash decisions or emotional reactions. Every battle plan is reviewed meticulously by our Leadership Council. Dr. Lena Corwin powered down her analysis tool and turned toward Colonel Braddock. Her face was pale and troubled. Colonel, I need to transmit a classified update to command, immediately. Give me your conclusion, Doctor, Braddock replied. Corwin's voice dropped. The Vorax aren't just invaders or soldiers. They're a planetary-level extinction force. Wherever they land, they annihilate everything. It all becomes part of their biomass. They don't seek land, wealth, or dominance. They devour reality itself. Braddock gave a solemn nod. He'd already suspected it, but having Earth's foremost alien biologist confirm it gave weight to the horror. And the Alliance is trying to repel them with policy papers and moral lectures. They're brave people, she added, nodding toward Nereth, who was currently monitoring data at a nearby console. But this is beyond anything in their experience. To them, war is just extended diplomacy. They're trying to reason with a storm. Later that night, Braddock and Corwin met again in the vessel's tiny quarters assigned to human personnel. Corwin had spent hours studying harvested genetic material taken from dead Vorax organisms. What she found was worse than expected. They're not separate beings, she told him, showing magnified visuals on her portable microscope display. Each one is connected via some form of organic neural link. They communicate across vast distances in real time. They share instincts, strategies, memory. So when one dies, Braddock said slowly, the others learn how and why. Instantly, she confirmed. They adjust faster than any traditional army could ever hope to. If we manage to destroy even a single one with a prototype weapon, every other Vorax unit in existence immediately knows how to resist that attack. It's not a military. They're a singular life form with millions of limbs. Braddock leaned closer, scanning the diagrams. His tactical instincts were racing ahead. That changes the entire equation. You can't debate with a virus. You can't sign treaties with a wildfire. Exactly, Corwin whispered. And the Alliance leadership still believes in compromise. They're trying to negotiate with a force that only sees them as biomass to recycle. That night, Braddock filed his field report back to Earth. It was concise, stripped of emotion, but packed with heavy implications, just the way High Command preferred it. But his judgment was dire. The Alliance had no future. Not at this rate. Their starships were being picked apart across dozens of sys. Their colonies devoured. Their hope fading. Despite having more advanced weaponry, superior fleet numbers, and centuries of battle doctrine, none of it counted. They were engaged in the wrong kind of confrontation. The Vorax weren't fighting for ideology or territory. They were driven by instinct. They would continue until nothing living remained, and Braddock's closing statement made that clear as crystal. Urgent recommendation. Deploy entire military arsenal immediately. No diplomatic engagement advised. Containment is not possible. Diplomacy is irrelevant. What we're facing is extermination, not conquest. Request authorization to demonstrate what humans mean by unlimited engagement. Colonel Rourke relayed the message via the ship's entangled transmitter. Earth would receive it in mere hours. Then, he headed toward Commander Zalrix's quarters. I have a critical question, Rourke began. When our armada arrives, will you follow our strategic lead? Zalrix's skin dimmed with hesitation. That depends entirely on your methods, Colonel. Rourke gestured toward the ashen planet visible through the viewport. Then prepare yourselves, because we'll ask you to abandon the rules of honor you cling to. The alien leader didn't reply right away. Silence lingered. Finally, Zalrix asked, "And what exactly does that involve?" "You'll understand when it begins," Rourke answered coldly. "Just be sure you're ready." Fleet Marshal Helena Graves disembarked her drop shuttle onto Concord Base Prime, and every non-human nearby paused in stunned silence. This was not the warlord they'd envisioned. Coalition officials had expected towering brutes or snarling beasts. Graves was neither. With silvered hair and steady eyes, she moved like a retired professor rather than the commander of a planetary-scale assault force. But that illusion wouldn't last long. Trailing her were 500 troops, soldiers, engineers, and tactical officers. Their movements were disciplined, quiet, efficient. Their sealed cargo held technology unreadable by Coalition scans, and Earth's military had firmly declined requests to open their armaments for inspection. Within the conference center, Supreme Envoy Falrin waited. He was statuesque, his bronze-hued body draped in traditional robes, centuries of diplomatic decorum flowing in every motion. Around the oval chamber sat leaders from a dozen species, each representing a branch of the Interstellar Alliance, strategists, generals, and elected officials. "Marshal Graves," Falrin began, his translator providing flawless English, "we are deeply grateful for Earth's immediate support. We seek a resolution that benefits all parties." Graves didn't waste breath on pleasantries. "I've reviewed your incident logs. This isn't a conflict. It's eradication, and we're here to end it." Uneasy glances bounced around the chamber. Fleet Commander Nar, head of the Coalition's defense network, leaned forward. He towered over the table, his chitin-covered frame proof of his warrior heritage. "We value Earth's assistance," he said carefully, "but precise coordination is critical. We've spent cycles refining our doctrine." "Your doctrine is the reason you're bleeding systems," Graves snapped back. Beside her, Strategic Director Ilara Wynn tapped a control and displayed a massive 3D projection, a live visualization of the last half-year's major losses. "You've surrendered 47 planets," Wynn said, not bothering to sugarcoat the facts. Morgan stated bluntly, "Your naval capacity has dropped by nearly 1/3. Their forces have tripled. If trends hold, this alliance will collapse in just over a year." The chamber fell into tense quiet. Varel's features flushed. Humans had learned that signified embarrassment. But conflict isn't solely a matter of wins and losses. We must weigh the ethical consequences of every action. Marshal Graves rose and moved to the center display, gesturing at the devastated planetary images. "Ethics? They consumed 3 billion sentience last cycle. Exactly how much morality did they apply?" "That is precisely why restraint is vital," replied High Admiral Naxel. "The Concord stands for civilization, law, balance, and honor. If we forfeit those values, we become no better than the invaders." Dr. Evelyn Hart, silent until now, raised her voice. "No, Admiral. The difference is, we'll still be here, alive." The aliens looked stunned as Hart activated a new data feed. "The Vorax don't have moral codes to lose. They're not cruel or just. They're like a tsunami." Virel raised 2 of his 4 hands. "Dr. Hart, surely you're not endorsing unrestrained military aggression." "I'm suggesting you aim to survive," she answered without pause. "Your doctrine is focused on preservation. Theirs is focused on annihilation. Guess which approach wins more battles?" Graves returned to her seat, eyes unwavering. "We've developed precise strategies grounded in what works against them: But before we deploy, I need your assurance." Admiral Krell shifted in his organic plating, an involuntary signal of unease. "Commander, our alliance boasts 3 millennia of tactical evolution. Our battle doctrines are rooted in experience, surely joint coordination. Your doctrines presume your enemy cares about survival," Morgan cut in. "They don't. They'll sacrifice every unit they have without hesitation if it means victory. Can you say the same?" At last, Virel asked, "Then what exactly are you proposing?" Graves brought up her own schematic, Earth's war doctrine and combat models. Unrestricted warfare, no safe zones, no off-limit targets. One rule: eliminate the threat entirely. Several diplomats reeled back as if she'd struck them. Instant uproar followed. Shouted objections, panicked tones, a storm of translations clashing in the air. Graves waited until the storm passed. "You're describing extinction," said Krell, his voice shaking. "No," she replied evenly. "Extinction is what they're doing to you. We're offering a way to end it." For the next 3 hours, the Earth delegation explained their campaign. It was brutal, yes, but it worked. Rather than shielding vulnerable colonies, they'd track and dismantle every Vorax swarm. Instead of avoiding casualties, they'd target— "But what of the ethical cost?" Virel asked. "How do we explain such destruction to our citizens?" "How do you justify leaving them to be devoured?" Morgan responded. "Every second you hesitate, another civilization falls. Every breath you waste worrying about appearances, another star system burns. Every moment you debate ethics, another million Concord civilians are devoured by the Vorax." The first test arrived faster than anticipated. Long-range monitors picked up a Vorax recon group en route to the factory-heavy colony of Dalveris Major. Typical Concord protocol would demand population withdrawal and fortification around strategic points. Commander Ethan Graves, commanding the Crimson Aegis, received alternative instructions. "All human units, this is Marshal Graves," came the order. "Target code Alpha, hostile fleet inbound to Dalveris Major. Enemy strength, 12 ships." While the Concord Defense Array braced for a prolonged standoff, anticipating the usual grinding skirmish, Graves accelerated straight toward the enemy line. Trailing behind was the Valkyrie, led by Captain Lucas Wren, followed by 3 more Terran vessels. Their formation didn't resemble a blockade. It looked like wolves hunting cornered prey. Supreme Admiral Thaurin, observing from his command bridge, stared at the display in disbelief. What are they thinking? They're outnumbered 3-1. The screen showed the human ships piercing the Vorax formation head-on. The bioengineered alien ships moved to intercept, assuming easy conquest. They had never engaged humans before. Graves' crew had dissected every fragment of data Concord xenobiologists had scraped together on the Vorax. They knew exactly where to— More importantly, they understood the Vorax had no experience facing a species fighting not for honor, but for annihilation. The Crimson Aegis wasn't equipped for mercy. Its payloads weren't calibrated for disabling. They were engineered to vaporize. When Terran torpedoes collided with the Vorax hulls, there were no escape pods, no crippled ships, no distress signals, only wreckage. Within 20 minutes, the entire recon unit was shredded. Not a single human vessel had even been breached. On Concord Central Hub, the military leadership watched the playback in absolute silence. They had seen what they previously believed to be impossible: a flawless triumph against the Vorax. "How?" whispered Admiral Varnus. "They didn't hold back," Dr. Hart answered. "No hesitation, no rescue operations, no proportional response, just calculated elimination." Marshal Graves rose from his chair. "That was a minor encounter. When the Terran main fleet arrives, we'll— of what humans do when they go all in." As the Terran delegates left the chamber, Virel called after them. Marshal, what you did today, was that truly necessary? Graves paused at the threshold. Counselor, you've asked the wrong question for a year and a half. You keep asking, what's right? You should be asking, what keeps us alive? The Vorax already answered it. Outside in the corridor, Morgan matched pace with Graves. Think they'll adjust to our tactics? Graves shook his head. They can't. It's not in their design. That's why they reached out to us in the first place. And if they try to limit us? Morgan asked. Graves didn't blink. Then they'll understand why humans don't lose, because we don't quit until the threat is ash. Everything shifted the day humanity stopped playing it safe. Commander Elias Ward stood at the nerve center of Outpost Sigma, the first Terran stronghold planted deep inside contested territory. 3 months ago, the colony known as Horizon Reach was choking under constant pressure. For nearly a year, Alliance troops had been steadily retreating, losing yard after yard as the Vorax tide swallowed entire cities. Then the Terrans arrived, bringing a new philosophy on how to wage war. Status check, Ward barked toward his tactical officer, Lieutenant Jonah Reeve. All Vorax units neutralized in zones 7 through 12, Reeve confirmed. Our engineers are planting demolition charges along the tunnel grid. We'll have the subsurface networks purged in under 6 hours. Ward turned to the central map table. The surface of Horizon Reach was dotted with thousands of red blips, each a former enemy site, now silent. Just 72 hours prior, those dots had glowed green, signaling active Vorax nests that Alliance forces had failed to breach for months. The change? Simple. Terrans didn't siege positions. They obliterated them. From below, her combat gear smeared with black crust, rotted remains of Vorax biomass. She looked battered but fierce. Subterranean zone is clean, sir, she reported. My squad eliminated roughly 200 hostiles, including multiple brood hives. 0 friendly losses. Ward regarded her with silent admiration. Lang's unit had cleared tunnels the Alliance had labeled unassailable. Dozens of prior attempts had ended in carnage, hundreds dead. Lang's fire team of 13 had ended the threat in one sweep. How'd you manage that, Sergeant? Ward asked. The Alliance lost entire battalions in there. Lang pulled off her helmet, her young face soaked in sweat but steady. Sir, they tried to preserve the tunnels, to take ground and minimize destruction. We weren't interested in capturing anything. We just went in and made sure nothing came out alive. Turns out, that's way simpler. Alliance liaisons had watched the human ground offensive unfold with a cocktail of dread and awe. Their soldiers advanced cautiously, wary of civilian structures and trying not to overstep ethical lines. Terrans operated differently. They didn't clear houses. They leveled them. They didn't secure sectors. They purged them. Dr. Evelyn Morrow entered the command hub holding a tablet brimming with sensor readouts and biological scans. She'd been dissecting the remains from recent encounters, trying to untangle the true nature of the enemy. Commander, here's what you asked for, she said without ceremony. The Vorax operating here weren't individual creatures. They're components of a larger organism, linked through a kind of neural bionetwork inside the tunnels. When we destroyed their command nodes, every single unit went down, instantaneously. Ward squinted at the readouts. So, they're not troops. They're pieces of something bigger. Exactly, Morrow nodded. Imagine them like immune cells. They can act alone briefly, but they function as part of a greater organism. The Alliance kept fighting them like traditional enemies, shooting at soldiers. They should have been treating them like a hive with a brain. That one discovery flipped the human approach on its head. No more hunting individual Vorax warriors. Now, Terran units sought out the nodes, their command brains, the clusters, the real target. No more trench lines, only the question, where's the brain, and how fast can we kill it? crippling the enemy's ability to communicate and multiply, had shattered the Vorax. In orbit, Fleet Marshal Naomi Vance commanded the most formidable Terran armada ever deployed, 47 warships, over 20,000 crew, and enough firepower to vaporize continents. They didn't travel like envoys. They moved like a plague. The Vorax core mind, a sprawling consciousness distributed across thousands of that changed during the confrontation at Sector Theta 359. For a species that had devoured galactic clusters, the idea of an enemy becoming more dangerous when cornered was alien. Vance stood rigid on the bridge of her flagship, resolute. The Vorax fleet on the display was colossal, outnumbering her force 3-1. Any strategist would have advised retreat. Terrans weren't strategists, they were executioners. All squadrons, Vance broadcast. Priority targets are their command nodes. We're not here to seize land or collect prisoners. Our mission is extinction. Engage at will. Terran vessels broke into scattered strike patterns, aggressive, chaotic, suicidal by most standards. Rather than form defense lines, they plunged deep into the enemy swarm. Rather than shield themselves, they concentrated solely on neutralizing command vessels. Commander Devon Hale, captain of the Black Fang, found his ship hemmed in and half his team incapacitated. Alliance procedure would have ordered a retreat. Hale had different instructions. Engineering, give me full thrust. Everything we've got, he snapped. Nav, plot a direct impact vector. That big bastard's our target. All decks, brace for collision. The Black Fang rocketed forward, aimed like a bullet at the enemy's central ship, a grotesque biomechanical leviathan pulsing with command signals. Hale's crew scrambled to stabilize systems, keeping the vessel intact just long enough. Captain, message incoming from Alliance relay craft, said the comms officer. They're demanding we pull out immediately. Hale's mouth curled into a sharp grin. Tell them Terrans don't retreat. We just attack from unexpected angles. The Black Fang slammed into the command ship at full burn, detonating in a blinding eruption that lit space across a dozen sectors. Human strike teams swept in, targeting the dazed remnants with ruthless precision. The battle raged for hours. When the guns finally fell silent, every Vorax ship had been eradicated. 8 Terran ships were gone. But they'd done what the Alliance thought impossible, obliterated a numerically superior force. Inside the mind space of the Vorax hive, the Queen consciousness recoiled in confusion. It was the first catastrophic loss in generations. It began withdrawing, pulling forces away from fringe systems, regrouping in safer sectors. Something ancient, alien, and all-consuming had finally met an opponent it didn't know how to digest. Understanding an enemy willing to annihilate itself rather than accept loss required a shift in thinking. Back on Horizon Delta, Commander Rylan Graves received a priority communication from the Allied Galactic Council. Commander Graves, APC Command requests immediate clarification of Terran combat procedures. Our field teams report that your units are utilizing strategies which appear to disregard multiple interstellar combat agreements. Please explain. Graves stared at the screen in silence before replying. To AGC Command, he began, speaking into the terminal. Terran doctrine is straightforward. We locate hostiles and remove them. Entirely. No hostages, no ceasefires. No mercy for enemies who only return stronger. If this contradicts your ethics, perhaps your ethics need a reality check. He paused before adding, one more thing. Remove any of your personnel from disputed regions. When our main offensive launches, we can't ensure their survival. Terrans don't fight to make statements. We fight to finish wars. That evening, Graves stood atop the auto deck of Outpost Omega, gazing into the void. Out there, past the orbiting moons and dead satellites, the largest, Earth-born armada, ever assembled, was on the move. It was preparing to do what the AGC had failed to do for a year and a half: eliminate the Varnak threat, once and for all. Dr. Evelyn Shaw stepped beside him at the viewport. "The AGC's terrified of us now," she murmured. "They think we're becoming like the Varnak." Graves didn't look away from the stars. "Maybe we are," he said. "But at least we have a choice in how far we go. And how far is that?" He looked down toward the scorched plains of Horizon Delta, where Terran fire teams were methodically wiping out all remaining traces of alien corruption. "We stop," he said, "when there's nothing left to eliminate." Above them, stars shimmered, silent, unaffected by the slaughter raging beneath them. But for the first time in a long, brutal campaign, the Varnak were afraid. They had discovered something worse than themselves. 6 months after first engagement, the Varnak Collective ceased to exist. Commander Rylan Graves walked slowly through the Remembrance Garden at the heart of Horizon Delta. He ran his hand across the polished stone wall, tracing the engraved names of the fallen. Each etching belonged to a Terran warrior who had perished fighting for worlds they never knew, for people they never met. 12,000 names, a price Earth had willingly paid to give the galaxy a chance at peace. The garden was still. No sounds but the wind brushing through the saplings planted by AGC reclamation teams. They'd spent weeks decontaminating the surface after the Varnak plague had been scrubbed from existence. Restoration would take decades, but at least Horizon Delta had a future again. Dr. Shaw found Graves sitting alone on a curved bench, eyes on the stone monolith at the center. She didn't speak right away. She didn't have to, because sometimes victory doesn't sound like cheers. Sometimes it sounds like silence, finally earned. She held a tablet in her hands, its screen filled with her final analysis of the war. A document destined to be sealed under the strictest secrecy and hidden deep within Earth's most secure vaults. "The shuttle departs for Earth in 2 hours," she said, taking a seat beside him. "Are you ready to leave, Elijah?" Captain Elijah Ward stared at the engraved names on the remembrance wall. "Do you think we're saviors or destroyers?" "Maya? Probably both," she answered instantly. "But does it even matter anymore?" "The Alliance seems to think it does," Ward replied. "Half of their leaders want to honor us. The rest just want us gone." Dr. Maya Lorne powered on her tablet and showed him the final tally of the war. "The Varnak overran 47 inhabited systems and took 28 billion lives before we intervened," she said. "In just half a year, Terran forces wiped them out. 12,000 human soldiers lost, an entire species erased, and the mental toll on every Alliance observer who saw what we did." Ward rose and walked to the wall again, his fingers resting gently on a single name. Private Lena Cruz had died during the closing battle on the Varnak core world, leading a small squad into the hive's reproductive chambers. She was 23. "She knew what she signed up for," he murmured. "They all did." When Admiral Taylor asked for volunteers to stay behind and make sure the last nests were destroyed, 30,000 stepped forward. Lorne came to stand beside him. "They don't get it," she said. "The Alliance can't process the idea of dying for people you've never met. Maybe that's what sets us apart from the Varnak. We decide who we protect and who we don't. The Varnak devoured everything." Meanwhile, on Allied Command Station Meridian, Admiral Patricia Taylor stood before the Alliance Council for the final summit. Chancellor Ralvin addressed her first, his iridescent skin dulled with fatigue. "Admiral Taylor, the Alliance offers its deepest thanks for humanity's intervention in our darkest hour. We hope to begin permanent diplomatic ties and possibly study your combat doctrines." Taylor didn't respond right away. "You asked for aid," she said finally. We gave it. But you never asked to become what we are, and I hope you never do." Fleet Commander Nolar leaned forward, his armored frame catching the ambient glow. "Surely, Admiral, there are tactical insights we could benefit from. Techniques to improve our own defenses in the future." "You mean how to wipe out an entire species with precision," Taylor said, voice cold. "How to silence your conscience after executing a planetary purge." She didn't wait for an answer. "Earth didn't enter this war to show restraint. We came to end it." Ralvin nodded slowly. We feared the Varnak because they were unstoppable. Now we fear the cost of surviving them." Taylor stood, her voice calm but final. "Then maybe you're starting to understand what it takes to win. Wiping out a civilization, sending fresh-faced soldiers into certain death because it's the only way to save countless others. How do you live with that?" No one from the assembly spoke. Briggs went on, voice soft but steady. "We never intended to train you to fight like Terrans. You shouldn't have to. The moment you all gone," Briggs confirmed. "They were devouring everything in their path. Sometimes there's no noble option left. Sometimes it's survival or extinction." Commander Noah Reyes stepped into the chamber, handing Briggs a coded relay from Earth Central. She scanned the message, then addressed the Council. "We've received formal instructions from Terran High Command. All Earth forces are to exit Alliance territory at once. We're heading back." The Council looked stunned. Admiral Sharik spoke first. "General, surely maintaining a minimal human fleet presence would aid long-term galactic security." Briggs raised a hand to stop him. "We arrived to fix a crisis. The crisis is over. Our part is done." Dr. Leon Wen, seated toward the rear, stood and folded her data slate under her arm. "So, the Alliance is writing up new legal frameworks for contact with worlds like ours, right?" Velrin's face flushed a deeper shade as he hesitated. "The Council is reviewing future policies regarding engagement with high-threat biospheres. You're making it illegal to reach out to Earth unless the stars are literally dying," Lee said flatly. It wasn't a question. "The Meridian Pact," Sharik admitted. "We have agreed that Earth will not be contacted again unless the galaxy faces an existential-level crisis that can't be handled through ordinary military action." Briggs nodded slightly. "That's wise. Some lines should only be crossed when there's no light left." As the Terran group rose to leave, Velrin called out one last concern. "General, what if someday Earth decides to conquer rather than protect? What if you choose to become what we just saw destroyed?" Briggs paused in the doorway. "You called and we came. Not for power, not for conquest, but to help. That's the line that defines us. We decide when enough is enough." 3 days later, the final Earth warships left Alliance space. Commander Reyes stood at the helm of the Steel Horizon, watching distant alien planets fade from view. His vessel had been the first to respond when the galaxy cried for help, and now it would be the last one to turn away. Now it stood among the final ships to depart. "Any second thoughts, Captain?" asked his signals officer, Ensign Drew Matthews. Reynolds considered the question deeply. "We preserved over 200 billion lives, Drew. Stopped 12 intelligent species from vanishing. The universe is free of a plague that had swallowed entire empires." "That's not what I meant," Drew replied. Reynolds turned to the framed portraits along the command deck walls, images of fallen crew members, young souls who'd never walk on Earth again. "I regret it had to be done. I regret we were the only ones who could do it. But I don't regret standing up when no one else could." Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Eliza Monroe finalized her top-secret evaluation within a high-security research bunker beneath Defense Command. Her closing thoughts would be viewed by a select few and then buried indefinitely. Human combat proficiency proved overwhelmingly lethal against a species-level existential danger, she wrote. However, the mental toll on our forces and the unease we caused in our allied civilizations means such action must remain a final measure. She paused, remembering the Remembrance Garden on New Solstice and the etched names along its walls. Then she resumed, "We are the antibodies of the cosmos. We are nature's answer to threats no one else can face, armed with the capacity for annihilation, yet bound by ethics. We can destroy utterly, but we don't destroy indiscriminately." She encrypted the report and marked it under maximum clearance. Her final line would become the unofficial slogan of Earth's stellar defense: "Pray it's never needed again." 6 months afterward, the Alliance unveiled a tribute in the heart of their galactic capital, unadorned obsidian, bearing a singular message translated into every known dialect. "To the people of Earth, who came when we called and stopped when we asked, may such assistance never again be necessary." Buried in Coalition High Command's most classified databank, a contingency plan was drafted, codenamed Protocol Last Dawn. It listed only one destination: Terra, Solar Sector. The directive was blunt: open only in the face of total annihilation of all intelligent life in the known galaxy. Humanity had departed, leaving behind a realm secured, appreciative, and quietly haunted by what it had witnessed. The Alliance would grow, explore, and flourish across millennia. And in the deep shadows of space, when children whispered tales of the horrors that once devoured entire planets, their parents would respond with stories of different beings who came from a world of oceans and skies and made the first monsters vanish without a trace. The fighting had ceased. Humanity had prevailed. But as the galaxy would eventually understand, victory is simple. Living with what it demands is far more difficult.